Hi, welcome
Hi.
everyone, and welcome Renuka. Hi, it's good to have you here.
Hello.
um, we're here to talk about the Aware Parenting series by Soulkatha. We're here to talk about parents, caregivers, teachers, anyone who's actually interested in improving the lives of children, to improve their life through actually shining a light on yours and saying, hey, what can I do better? How can I stand up for myself and stand up for my child? And that's why we're bringing on people who are really, really passionate about what they do through their work with children, through their work with parents, and through their own inner self work, because actually it just starts with the individual first. So I'm really delighted to have Renuka here. Renuka is a psychologist. She's been trained to think about how to prevent, cure, and eliminate uh, neurodiverse conditions like autism, um, ADHD, genetic disorders. And I think it's been a really, really interesting experience for her because from this clinical scientific background, she's come to now found a beautiful organization called the Owl House in Goa. I think some of you might want to check that out, where they bring together these beautiful children who are all neurodiverse, which is the topic of today, the challenges of caregivers for the neurodiverse. That's exactly what Renuka does, because here she is with all her science, and then she's sort of put that into a box and said, okay, how can we actually be really present for these children? And I think that her journey has found that it's actually through positive, unconditional, positive regard, which I love. I love that word. When she said it, I was like, why? I need to memorize this word. Um, to bring in acceptance, to understand them for who they are in their unique ways, and to actually make them learn in a way that they understand and enjoy that. And I think it's been a very interesting journey to come from that background into this. And the whole thing is inspiring. And I'm not going to talk anymore. I think I'm going to ask Renuka to say a few words. Renuka, start with where you want to, and also tell us what you think are the biggest challenges faced by caregivers of the neurodiverse. How are they managing and coping in these times?
All right. Hi everyone. I'm Renuka, as Karishma said, and for the past 2 years, I've worked. I was founding member with an organization called the Owl House, and we work with people with special needs, mainly adults, actually. Um, a few kids. So our youngest student is about 3 years old, and I think the oldest is 40. So that's like quite a wide range. And during this time, we also have found that families are really our partners in what we do. And without caregivers or without your primary family, what we can do with you is very limited, because a lot of students, of course, they spend a few hours of the week with us, but they spend most of their time with their parents. And parents are, of course, the most, they're the biggest stakeholders in the lives of their children, of course. And so, yeah, we think families are really, really important, uh, particularly in this time, in the time of this pandemic. And I think some of the challenges, or some of the main challenges that families face, I like to think about it in terms of the past, the present, and the future. And what happens a lot of the time is that, specifically for people who have uh, children who are differently able or who have developmental conditions. I mean, this also happens with all other parents, I have to say. There is a certain amount of maybe guilt or regret regarding the past, regarding things that you believe you could have done a little bit better, things you could have done differently to avoid challenges that you're now facing in the present. The present, of course, is full of its own, day to day, almost operational things, like having to provide for someone, having to be there for someone unconditionally, but of course, in a way where you can't really switch off, you can't really take a break, even if you're done cooking for the day, even if you're done cleaning for the day. You can't really completely switch off like you would when you were younger, if you didn't have this kind of responsibility. And that's the present. And of course, when it comes to the future, there is so much uncertainty, specifically for parents of students that I work with at the Owl House, because you can plan for everything, and when you have children who will maybe go on to have typical jobs and incomes and support themselves, what happens with a lot of our parents is that you're so uncertain about what will happen to your child after you're gone. What happens then, even if you have monetary resources. I mean, if you don't, that's a whole other set of challenges, but even if you do, it's who will be there for your child, who will be able to love them like you do, who will be able to support them like you do. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that caregivers face. So yeah.
It's really interesting, right? The past, the present, the future, because I think that in itself brings into a whole ball of empathy that we can feel for caregivers, who have to take care of children with challenges. Because, everyone's saying, hey, our life is so uncertain, but they know their life is going to be uncertain for the rest of their life. And that's an amount of stress and anxiety that I think that, is really, really, you wouldn't wish it upon anybody, right? Just wouldn't. And I think that then it brings me to my next question, because we as a society keep saying, oh, this is normal and that is not. Here are the differently abled and here are the abled. And I really want you to spread some light on this. What do you think about that? How do you think these classifications, you know, um, stigmatize or uh, put people into boxes that they possibly don't belong to?
Yeah, I mean, I think classifications of any sort. I understand their uses specifically in the clinical world, but I think nomenclature and classifications of any sort in this space, specifically when you're talking about human beings and their lived experiences, can be very very limiting. And like I talked in previously about the challenges, and of course there are significant challenges, but there are also amazing gifts. There are also amazing strengths that a lot of people with special needs have. And again, this is not to say that everyone is exceptional at something, just like people in the neurotypical world aren't. Not everyone is exceptional at something, but everyone has the capacity to create this change in perspective, to evoke love, to evoke positive responses in other people, and to experience success themselves. And of course, it happens with varying degrees in different people. Like we had a student, for example, at the Owl House, and of course he doesn't speak too much. He doesn't communicate via speech too much, but he paints, and he's an artist. And you would assume, when he's young, when he's about like 21, and you think, okay, this he's not communicating anything, so he probably doesn't understand things. But he's so purposeful in what he does. um like, very often he's doing something and he's coloring something, and to me it looks really random, and I'm just like, hey, why don't you try it with this color, why don't you try it again? And he just wants to do what he wants to do, and it ends up looking really beautiful. And I think that, I mean, this was just my example in terms of how our language itself is very very limited in what we think it can do for us. Of course, communication skills are important, and it allows for you to build skills and do things, but I think it's just very narrow the way that we perceive things. For a lot of people with autism, they also have sensory processing challenges, which means they might, say, make certain sounds, or want visual stimulation, or want stimulation in terms of taste or touch. And it's just they're perceiving the world so differently. It's a different thing. It can be a really beautiful thing. And I just feel like we limit all of that by constantly wanting to make everyone our idea of normal. Constantly being like, oh, if he makes this sound, then he's not acting like everyone else in his class, so now he needs to stop making the sound to act like everyone else in his class. And I mean, sometimes this child is singing something in a language maybe that you don't understand, but it's a beautiful sound and you can't appreciate it for what it is, because everyone's always in this thing of, let's let I want him to be like everyone else. And I mean, however much we talk about empathy, when you actually go into the day-to-day life of a parent or of a child, it's really not easy to always experience this unconditional empathy for someone else. It's so hard, and I, as a psychologist, I use the word so much. I'm like, you should be empathetic, you should do this. But at the end of the day, the real someone's lived experience is so much more vast than that. Yeah, so anyway, I think that nomenclature and general classification of this sort is limited. I think it's important in terms of a diagnosis to understand what a child might be experiencing and challenges that they are likely to face in their lifetime. So I'm not advocating for removing diagnoses and removing labeling in that sense. But I think, for example, with autism, the classification of someone as being low functioning versus high functioning is problematic because, and this is the reason, so a lot of neurodiverse people in America and in other Western countries that I have seen are fighting for this. They say that, everyone calls me high functioning. I'm autistic, but I can communicate and I can speak, and everyone says I'm high functioning. And that makes people think that I have fewer challenges. But my life on a day-to-day basis is as hard because I can't make friends. I'm very aware of my challenges and my situation and what it is. With people who might be lower functioning, although in terms of maybe doing a job, they aren't doing a job, maybe in terms of their daily activities, they're not being able to do it independently and they need support. And we consider that to be lower functioning. But in their psyche and their space, they might actually be happier because, they don't have, I guess, the kind of expectations that you have out of another adult, and they're allowed to live their life in that sense. So yeah, I mean, for those reasons, I think these are limiting, and we shouldn't necessarily categorize people in that sense, but speak more specifically about the challenge that they are experiencing in the here and now. And I think that definitely helps in terms of, yeah.
Okay, so that's really beautifully put. From just listening to you, the way I'm looking at it is there's a person in front of you. Can I step back and look at them for who they are and tune in to whatever language, visually, through sound, through body,
Yeah.
always this non-verbal cues that you pick up. And if I'm really present, then I can hear all these different things that that person is communicating in their unique way.
Yeah.
I have to be alive to that because I myself am programmed, right? I have this code that's inside me, and everyone I'm like typing in, and that person has to respond to this code, and then it's easy. But then the minute I have to like stop, step back, and I'm like, I have to be present. I'm like, oh, I don't understand your code. Like the wiring's off. So and then there's this frustration that comes from it. But I think that I don't know what that movie comes to mind where everyone's unique and different, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but maybe I'll put it in the link below.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, and you don't expect everyone to be the same. So immediately, your wiring is different, and your expectations from life and people that you interact with are different. And I think maybe we teach our children from a younger age to accept other people, because even normal children are put into this box. And so we don't know where normal starts and not normal begins, and everyone's put into this box, right? And I think that you're absolutely right in saying that we should sort of be very careful about how we say what we say, and
Yeah.
and step back and be open, which then leads me to what are the qualities that you think, not just caregivers who have to be with their children, or nieces and nephews and grandkids, but what should people do, like you're doing that, and what qualities should caregivers and normal folk have, people like me have, what are those qualities that we should develop in ourselves to sort of embrace the differently abled into life, into society?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. At the Owl House, for example, what we do very often is that we ask people, neurotypical people, people from within the community, to come in and to meet with our students and work with them. Because, like you're saying, I think we're saying as a community how we can, like, look at ourselves. I mean, how can we define ourselves in a way that we can be more accepting and more open to understanding people who have different needs or who are neurodiverse in that sense. And what I was saying is that at the Owl House, we have a volunteer program and an intern program wherein anyone from within the community can come into the center and work with our students. Right now, this doesn't happen because of the pandemic, but we would have these events on Saturdays and do different things like, show the students a movie. And we'd set up the space in such a way that the whole room was made dark. And the students had to come in and stand in a line, buy tickets for themselves, buy themselves popcorn. So we're like mimicking a real life experience, but in a safe space wherein people can kind of interact with each other, because most people are good and kind, and if they're given the opportunity they will. I think all people are good and kind, actually, but yeah, I think when most people are given the opportunity to interact in a space like this, they're definitely able to, and everyone stands to learn a lot. And yeah, so in terms of what we can do, I think in general, the one big thing you got to do is when you're looking at behavior, human behavior, just question everything. Like, if you find something strange, if you find something that someone else is doing strange, even in a dinner party conversation, anywhere, question why you think it's strange. And if it warrants that reaction, really. Like, look at yourself with curiosity. Look at the way that you respond to things with curiosity. So if you find something in someone also very attractive, or you find something about someone being, oh, I like this person, I can relate with this person, you should question as to why do I feel like that, and then and you see that a lot of what you've imbibed and a lot of the way that you live is actually very, like you said, programmed. It's very, you don't really know why you feel a certain way about things. Like, if you hear someone, um like, if you see someone, say, playing with your hands in such a way, you might think like, why are they doing that, what's going on there? But I mean, if you just go to question it a little bit further, you'll be like, but what's wrong with it? It's not upsetting me, it's not upsetting anybody, it seems to be having a good time, what's the big deal? And then that really helps you gain perspective. So that's definitely one thing. I think another thing that we could all stand to learn, and I know everyone hears a lot about being patient and accepting and all of that. I like to think of it in terms of reacting versus responding. And when something happens in your environment or as parents with your kids, um, of course you're in the same space with them the whole day, and it's not at all easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but if we could keep in mind that when someone behaves in a particular way or says a particular thing that might, say, for example, in this case, upset us or be upsetting, we should be mindful of not always being the one to immediately react the exact way you're feeling in that moment. Because I think as adults, we all know that you might feel a certain way about something, and then 2 days later, you feel very different. You look back and think, like, why was I so anxious about that? And so just you know that you, as an adult, you have that capacity to, like, evolve in how you're thinking about things and how you're perceiving things. And so use that to kind of put into perspective what's happening right now, and just be like, I'm not going to react right now, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to respond as me, not as this, uh, just someone who's responded to an instinctual thought that's just come into my head. And really, it's not easy to do. I would say, if you were able to do it, like, I tell myself, if I can just do this once a day in my work or in my discussions, that's a success. So you start with, like, just set achievable goals for yourself. And yeah, the last thing I would want to say is, like you said at the start, I think self-care is really something that, you know we have to find a way, and parents must understand that self-care is so important. being being there for yourself, accepting however it is that you feel, whatever it is. There's sometimes so much guilt because you're feeling your child might do something, you might get angry about. You might get angry, like this happens to me all the time, right? And I'm in the middle of a session doing something and I have it all planned out in my head. I have my whole day planned out in my head. And then someone does something that kind of affects my plans, and my first reaction is like, oh God, why? Like, why? Just and then immediately after that, I go into a cycle of being really guilty that I felt that way. Like, how could I be like this? I understand this person. I understand the challenges he's going through. And with our constant talk about empathy, I think that everyone is so guilty that they're not able to empathize with something. That you're like, it's either two ends of a spectrum. I mean, that's one thing that I do. And another thing that I do is I'm always like, you're always empathizing with someone, and then you're just not processing any other feelings that are happening. You're rationalizing all behavior. And this would happen, I know, with like parents, even with other professionals. Sometimes in a space specifically with people who have challenges with verbal communication, and therefore sometimes might act out in other ways. So you might get hit, like a lot of parents experience. This is the reality. And so you might get hit, you might get spat on, and you experience this whole range of emotions that comes with that, because someone's actually violating your personal space and your sense of safety and security. And it's a really, really tough space to be in. And you can empathize. So in that moment, you're constantly telling yourself, this person has no other way to communicate. He's trying to tell me something, she's trying to tell me something, and I need to not be angry with her. I need to not feel bad about this. This is okay because it's happening for this reason. But the truth is, it's really, really hard to process things that way. I mean, your body, your mind is reacting. I knew a parent, for example, who was experiencing something like this, and she would just have like inexplicable crying spells, or, you know, like emotions manifesting in another way. And so I think it's really important to, in a situation where you're feeling upset, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling angry, allow yourself to feel those emotions. And I know that it's not always easy to do, but get some time away. Like, if you're away for a little while and you're taking care of yourself, that's a lot better than being this constantly angry, frustrated person with your child. It's much, much better if you take some time away and take some pressure off the both of you.
That's really good. So essentially, the three things that you've said is that one is to be,
Question.
sorry, to be curious.
Yes.
Sorry. So yeah, to be curious about, why someone is doing something, and stay in a space of non-judgmentality, and to sort of be accepting of, where they're at, instead of immediately drawing to that conclusion and passing that judgment. And then the next step would possibly be watching our own response rather than just reacting immediately. And then the next thing is giving ourselves the love and the care that we need to sort of, accept that person. And as you were saying this to me, even as a normal, as a child of a whatever, of a toddler, right? And it's so simple, as simple as that. My son sucks his thumb, and if we go out, the pre-pandemic days when we did go out, and if he sucked his thumb, complete strangers would come up and tell him, like, just not even ask him or me, they just take his thumb away from his mouth. And it's wonderful that a country like India, where people care enough to actually interfere or say something. But at the same time, he's like looking at that person and be like, why have you done that to me? You've taken my existence away, and we're all just looking. But this person believes that thumb sucking is bad, right? So they've gone on to make a judgment. They have reacted as per their judgment. And I think at that point of time, either they feel a great sense of emotion, because if I say, hey, you know what, it's okay if he sucks his thumb, and if you're saying in front of people, they might feel bad, or a normal parent might feel bad saying, imagine we've been around children who don't behave perfectly because they're neurologically diverse, they're different. And these parents are constantly embarrassed because the expectations of how these kids are supposed to behave at a birthday party is different. So imagine, people coming and giving instructions to them, which they can't even process. And these parents feeling so inadequate in themselves to deal with all of that, right? And the emotions that come with it. I can
Yeah.
totally understand that it would be so very difficult. And unless
Right.
they sat down and just had that big cry, or, yelled into the pillow, or go into the bathroom and scream, you know, things that you just have to do as a parent. This is part of the self-care. You just think, yeah, because I was going to ask you, what are the tools? But I think these are the tools, like, right? Oh, sit down, just take a break. Like, I totally agree. Leaving your children for a few hours isn't as bad, or you're not neglecting them. There's no need to feel guilty because you need the resources to cope with this. So I totally
Exactly.
agree, and I think so many people can resonate. Any tips you have for people, and then maybe we can end with some final thoughts, Renuka, about you. So if you have any tips beyond these, share them, and then maybe we'll also, yeah, we'll talk about, what motivates you to stay on the path to do what you do.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I have too many other tips. I like to think about things in terms of just, yeah, like I said, if I could summarize everything, it would just be like, each time you find yourself in a situation where you're just feeling so frustrated and you're questioning everything, um, you know, look at yourself with compassion, look at yourself with love. I wouldn't say, like, I mean, don't necessarily stop yourself from reacting or punish yourself in any way. Make sure that, I mean, you have one life, and you have one body, you have one, you have one lived experience, you have one circle of social support, and of course you can change some of those things, but just, I would say, look at yourself with love, with compassion, and with curiosity more than anything. Even if you do something that you've later gone on to regret, instead of, like, if you could replace that regret with explaining why you behaved a certain way or why you did that, just questioning it, even if you don't come up with an explanation that makes sense to you, just questioning it, I think, is really important. I tried this out once with a parent who came in, and his big concern was that, my son, when I try to take him out, I try to take him to birthday parties, but he goes there and he smells everything, and it's so embarrassing for me, because people keep coming up to me and saying, "Oh, look, he's smelling something," and, "Oh, look, he's doing this," and he smells everything. And I need him to stop doing that, because I need to be able to take him out, otherwise he's just at home all the time. And I just kind of questioned this a little bit, in terms of, why do you think he's smelling things? And this parent actually thought it was about this child just being a little bit obnoxious and being like, "Okay, I know it's irritating and it's getting me this reaction, so I'm going to do it again." But we went and found out later, and I mean, this parent really, I mean, all parents that I work with, for sure, really love their kids, and they're just trying to explain what's something in their life that just seems to be an anomaly. And in this case, we found that this boy had sensory processing, um, a disorder, and he was hyposensitive to smell. So he needed to take things really close to his mouth, and he enjoyed smelling things, and helped him calm, it helped him regulate. And we just got to a point where we discussed it, and we kept just ask yourself a question: but why would he do that? But why would he do that? But what would he get from that? But then what? But then what? And then you come down to what a reason for something might actually be.
Wow.
And you know you can look at the whole thing so differently. Like, now I see the parent talking to other parents and just saying that, so what? So what?
And
Why
this is
isn't
the most
how is
beautiful
it?
example of literally being neurodiverse, right? Like this child has a superpower that nobody else has in so many ways. And we, as normal, conditioned people, could not understand. But, and he couldn't explain or communicate that.
Mm.
But, if we caught up to the answers, then we can totally relate, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that would be overall what I mean. Um, so, in terms of my journey, like you were asking, I studied my MSc in clinical psychology, and during my course, my master's degree, I worked at a hospital. I studied at Manipal University, and so we worked at Kasturba Medical College in the psychology department, clinical psychology, and yeah, so I was very very oriented to that way of working, to therapy, and I mean that's what I wanted to do going forward. And I ended up meeting the people who were then founding the Owl House and starting it, and I joined, and I've been there ever since. I want to say as a disclaimer that I am not at all discounting the value of therapy and therapeutic practices and what they can do. I just, in my journey, found that for specifically people with developmental conditions, that therapy is becoming increasingly, at least in India, increasingly corrective, increasingly remediative. So, for autism, for example, the go to practice at the moment is applied behavioral analysis, which sometimes involves, for example, say you're teaching a child to pick up something, you might hold their hand like this and show them how to pick it up. And you do that repeatedly, and the prescribed amount of hours is 40 hours a week, which is pretty much like a job. So you're meant to do 40 hours a week of applied behavioral analysis for you to see changes in behavior. And so, say if a child is, say, stimming, then you might stop him from doing that, stop him from flapping his arms, stop him from. And I think that in certain ways, these practices can teach skills, they often become used as something that's very, let's improve this child, let's cure this child, let's sorry, did you?
Yes, we froze. Yeah.
Oh,
You were saying let's improve this child.
yeah, and let's like cure this person, and let's make him like everyone else so that we can just continue to live like we are right now. But I think that itself requires questioning. Like, we should think about our lives right now and what we do, and capitalism, and sorry, I don't want to stray into all of that, but I think everything needs questioning.
Actually, when I was reading about this, and I was thinking, so in the little work that I've done with kids who have autism and are neurodiverse, is that of course you step back and listen to their language, but all and there is that understanding of just like mirroring and little empowering tools that
Yeah,
you can communicate to them through that. And more than anything else, the sort of yoga or mindfulness that we do, it is about personalizing every single thing for the individual. Doesn't matter where in the chart you
yeah,
are, you know.
yeah,
The world, I think, is a movement, is hopefully slowly moving towards that. Like your thumbprint is different from everyone. Your neurological drive, needs, networking is different. So how can I connect to the other person? How can I make the
yeah,
practice fit to the person rather than the person fit to the practice? And that's exactly like,
exactly.
yeah, right down to the Yoga Sutra. That's exactly what it is. Please don't make your yogas, fit you, or your mindfulness practices or anything that you do, even your therapist. They have to do something that's personalized for you. Don't make the model fit the individual because it just doesn't work, you know.
Yeah. I
Just
mean, you're shoving someone into a box if instead you're like creating things to support them around them with their own needs and their own, that's so much better. Yeah, you're right. And I guess, I mean, that's the reason also that I found that although we initially focused a lot on therapy, We found that actually equipping someone with a skill and teaching them a skill that they, for example, a new skill that they can use to engage in having a successful experience. Like I say this a lot, and I just want to explain that when I say successful experience, I literally mean anything. Like for a lot of our students, putting cheese on a cracker and making a snack for themselves, putting it on a plate, sitting down and eating it is a big deal, you know. But for their whole lives, where you're going to try to make him write ABC, why? Why would you do that? So I mean, you know, and we found that if you're teaching someone something that they can do and allowing them to experience success at that, they're then open to learning new things. They're then open to trying out new things. When it
Absolutely.
comes to academics, for example, like there are so many kids who are so averse to even looking at a book and pen. If you even bring a book and pen on the table, they're like, they're so scared because in their childhood it's been hounded and hounded and hounded into them. But like for example, I might try doing that with a computer or with a VR headset. I'll tell you to like look at A and spell out your name. Or with a, you know, with a computer, I'll have you say something to the computer and it shows up as text. And I just found in so many ways that education, like you said, that's tailored to the learner. I'm not going to teach you everything regardless of who you are. I have this set book and I'm going to teach you everything that's in this book. No, don't look at it like that. Look at a person and what they need to be able to function, to be able to experience success on a daily basis, experience joy, and go with that. And so yeah, I mean, I think that's what we are about at the Owl House.
Fantastic.
And
Baby steps of celebration.
sorry.
Any final thoughts, Renuka? I think we're pretty much out of time. So,
Great. No, no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I think I've said everything. I had a really nice time talking to you, and I actually think that I've thought out a few things that were possibly in my head that I hadn't thought about that way before, regarding what you said about, you know, specifically code not matching and all of that. It's great. So
yeah,
I have really,
we're always learning, right, through these conversations. And hopefully,
yeah,
people who are watching are also learning and having little aha moments.
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah, just, yeah, baby steps, I think. Baby steps,
Yeah.
lots of self-care, and
Yeah.
really being, I think, like you said, being curious and then accepting the world for what it is rather than trying to find our code in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to, talk to everyone here at Soulkatha and beyond. I hope that everyone's really gained a lot from that. I will put Renuka's details below and the Owl House's details before if you'd like to learn more. If you think that someone will benefit, people that you know will benefit from their work, I'm sure they'll put you in touch with other places like themselves in different parts of the world and the country. Yes, and always shine brighter with Soulkatha. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, Renuka. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.